This meeting is being live streamed, so I guess we got it, right?
Good morning, everyone. If for anyone who's not speaking, if you could mute your microphone, that would be great. It is Thursday, February 24th, 9:06 a.m. And this is meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We are taking up this morning Bill S-281, an act relating to hunting coyotes with dogs, and want to get right to it. So I think we've introduced the bill. We've done a walkthrough. We've had a hearing. We've had some committee discussion. Now we wanted to revisit the law and have a more in-depth discussion. And I would like to welcome back to the committee, Commissioner Herrick. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, Senators. For the record, I'm Christopher Herrick, and I am the Commissioner at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So with respect to S-281, I will reiterate what I've previously testified to, mainly that we would recommend allowing for regulation of the activity rather than an outright ban. Fish and Wildlife would specifically recommend the following. One is requiring permits for any hunter using hounds to hunt eastern coyotes. We issue permits currently for bear hunting with hounds, and it allows the department to track who is hunting in this fashion, how many bears are taken. Currently, we have no similar data on the frequency of coyote hunting with dogs, and we only have really anecdotal information. For an example, here's a statutory provision requiring a permit to hunt black bear with dogs. The statute could be changed.
He's muted.
I think Commissioner Herrick, you're mute. Somehow the mute came back on. There we go.
I don't know how that happened. When did you lose me?
Just when you mentioned, for example, here's a law around black bears.
So here's the statute for reference. It's 10 VSA 5007. Hunting black bear, and we would recommend adding, or eastern coyote with dogs. No person shall pursue black bear or eastern coyote with the aid of dogs, either for training or taking purposes, without a permit issued by the commissioner. The number of permits issued to non-residents in any given year shall not exceed 10% of the number of permits issued to residents in the preceding year. The commissioner shall establish a process for determining which non-residents are to receive a permit if there are more non-resident applicants than non-resident permits. I'm not going to get in. The last line is a non-resident may train dogs to hunt bear or eastern coyotes only while training season is in effect in the non-resident's home state and subject to the laws and regulations of that state, this state rather. Permits will be issued for residents in this example for $50. Application fees for non-residents shall be $10 with a permit fee of $200 for successful applicants. So we have the mechanism in place where we're suggesting that if we added eastern coyotes to that, we could achieve the ability to regulate. In addition, the regulations would be proposed to the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Board to initiate rulemaking based on the rules related to hunting black bear with hounds. The rules could include limiting the number of dogs which may be used. Currently, there is no such restriction. Regulate and limit the method of taking, for example, muzzle loader, rifle, or archery equipment. Require reporting and tagging of all coyotes taken with the aid of dogs. So I think that there is an opportunity and a mechanism to regulate this activity and address many of the issues and concerns. I will mention that we would work with the legislature if such a change were made, but there is a process. And since you just came from Elkhart, Senator Bray, you know the process, and we would move with all due speed and diligence to work through the LCAR and the VAPA and working with the board to adopt. So here's the process, just so you know. It's not something we can do overnight, but we certainly would move with through the process. We are a little hamstrung. We're at the mercy of scheduling for both ICAR and LCAR. So that's really simply the proposal, Senator and committee.
Okay, so thank you for coming in with a proposal. And can you sort of step back away from, you know, the proposal itself and talk to us about how the department looks at the health of the coyote population and what the role of hunting is within that?
So I am not the fur bearer biologist, and I can certainly ask Kim Royer to speak to that. But I do know this. In terms of hunting coyotes, or any management, we look at biological imperative. And with the case of coyotes, it's not, there's not a biological argument to hunt or not to hunt. But I will say there's a behavioral component that cannot be excluded from this discussion. And so there are cases in the state where coyotes are coming into backyards and taking chickens. They also do cause harm and damage to farms and the like, whether it's chickens or other livestock. And so the use of dogs, if that's what we want to focus the conversation on, often is used to move the coyotes away from an area. So if I had chickens in my backyard, which I don't, but we do have coyotes here in the islands, and they were picking off my chickens, I might want to do something that would drive them away and not make them feel comfortable coming here. So that's kind of, it's a behavioral concern that we have.
Okay. So if yeah, I've talked with a friend who had an experience with his dog injured on their own porch by coyotes, and then subsequently had someone with hounds in that apparently moved the coyotes off. So I can see how there are instances where there could be, you know, a legitimate benefit to someone in trying to move a population away from their particular location. I don't know what the other options are for doing it. And so I think that's, so I'll just leave it. It's not like I just want to acknowledge that there's situations where people have found hounds useful for moving coyotes away from a location that they didn't want to have them.
I think, Senator, if I might, the thing I would mention is it's important to have tools available at our disposal to be able to manage. And the more tools that we take away through an outright ban, then it changes the dynamic and the ability to address issues as they come up. And we are going to see, I would predict, more encounters with wildlife as we continue to develop land into their habitat, not ours.
In the case of chickens, for instance, if, and I think, so I want to verify this. You're not a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, and we don't have Mr. O'Grady with us this morning, but I think when livestock are threatened or injured, things like that, that there's always a right to take that animal. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that does. To the defense of property.
Yeah.
And that's not the correct term of art, but yes, that is my understanding as well. But that is also, some folks are also at work all day, and they're busy, and it's just, we don't want to limit unnecessarily people's ability to protect their property.
Okay. So you cited as a possible model of bear hounding provisions. And so one of the concerns I would want to share based on past conversations about the bear hound rule is control. So how would you, and I would say a problem related to bear hounds rule is that it says that merely, I would say, wearing a radio collar constitutes legal control. But by any sort of ordinary layperson definition, that hound is not in control. It's merely that you know where that hound is. And from the radio collars I'm familiar with, a good one can tell you where a hound is up 5, 6, 7 miles away. Mm-hmm. So it's if the rule you're considering mulling over only requires control to the degree that a hound would be wearing a collar, I don't think we solve the problem of having hounds in places where individuals who are opposed to the practice don't want hounds traveling. So if the hound is legally under the control of the hunter and land is posted, then it seems to me the hound, as one of the tools of the hunter, is trespassing just as if the hunter trespassed, and I think that's where that rule is problematic in terms of using it as a foundation for anything being proposed in the coyote side. So I'm just mentioning that now so that you don't, if you keep working on it, if this bill doesn't advance in its current form and you work on it, I wouldn't want you to hear about a potential problem later in the process, and you might be feeling like, why didn't you tell me that up front?
Sure, and I appreciate that. And as you know, because we've been communicating, we've been working on an alternative to this plan or to the bill, but we were notified late yesterday that we would be in here today, and we don't have, some of our parts of this plan are not complete and ready for prime time, as you say.
Right. Yep.
But we're certainly willing to have discussions with the committee or members of the committee to look at other parts of the issues that you feel like need to be at least addressed.
Okay. And one other question does the department not have the option of writing a rule itself as opposed to going to the Fish and Wildlife Board to engage them in doing the rule writing?
So, Senator, good question. In order to require the issuance of a permit, it needs to be done by the legislature.
Okay.
And that is really the biggest part of this. If you look back at my first testimony, I mentioned permitting because that's probably the biggest portion of this. All the rules and regulations are based on that. And so the answer is it needs to come, at least the direction to issue or create rules for the issuance of permits, and any associated fees would come from the General Assembly.
Okay. And just in terms of the details of what would be in the rule related to the permit, is that something you can write in the department as opposed to having to convene the Fish and Wildlife Board? And I'm asking that for two reasons. One is I think the lack of regulation for this issue, which has quite honestly, I think people have been aware of it for years, but the lack of action on the part of the board or department invites, some people to wonder how interested they are now in taking this on and in how timely a way. So if we were to go that route, I would want to try to ensure that we would, for everyone's sake, we would see, timely action. And if that means the department could write something more quickly than going through the entire board process, then maybe that would be a preferred route.
I don't believe that is allowable. But what I can assure you of, one, I can't speak to any attention or lack of attention or whatever it was word you used to describe previous activity of the department. I've been the commissioner since the first week of November. But here we are, and we're having this discussion. And I can give you, all I can assure you of is that we would marshal and work with our board to do it in the most efficient manner. Any implication that we would drag our feet is specious at this point. Yep. I think I've shown myself to be true to my word.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to be, I want to be, if it sounded at all disrespectful, that of course I don't mean that. It's just that it's the past history of inaction on the issue that I think has, left us all in an awkward spot. It's kind of like a tab got run up and then the bill got delivered on your watch.
Well, but I'll say this: we're having these discussions. It's the ball's moved down the field. I've come in with what I believe to be a reasonable proposition. The board has a function of ensuring that when the rules and regulations are adopted, that the public has its opportunity to weigh in, which is something I know this committee has expressed an interest in. And that is exactly how the process is designed. And I think it will show the value of the design of the board.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Any committee questions for the commissioner? Senator McCormick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're all agreed that no one wants to outlaw the taking of coyotes, that population control is an issue. And so then the question is, the bill calls for outlawing hounding as a method altogether. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that there are ways of hounding that do not have about them the aspects that some people find objectionable.
I think I understand what you're saying, Senator. And I think in general, yes, I think I can answer that in the affirmative.
And that would be the goal of the permitting, would be to allow hounding.
And I think specifically, I would refer to one of the sections where I talked about regulating the method of taking.
And okay, what I'm wondering is what those provisions would be and how they would prevent, because the complaints that I hear is, first of all, the simple one that it's cruel and unnecessarily cruel to the coyotes. The other is the property rights issue.
Right.
And I mean, Vermonters are pretty protective of their property rights. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I've got a note that I've gotten a lot of emails saying that outlawing hounding of coyotes violates Vermont tradition And yet it seems to me that respect for property rights is a Vermont tradition. And, well, who cares? Is not respecting a Vermont tradition. So I guess let's just look at those two. One is just the inherent cruelty, and the second one is the violation of people's property rights.
Okay, so the first thing I'll say, and I'm not trying to be callous, but nature is cruel in and of itself. And I'm not going to cite examples because the last time I cited examples, I was accused of trying to emotionalize the argument. But it is not, when an animal dies in nature, it's never or rarely is it a peaceful event. I will say that. Now, that does not mean I endorse or condone some of the activity which I think you're referring to. And so when you talk about the method of taking is using a rifle, using a handgun, using archery, that puts parentheses around how the animals are actually killed. So does that address that issue?
Well, what would you have the rules do?
The rules would
proposing we
address
do-
the method of taking. It would outline them. It would be prescriptive.
Would they prohibit hounding?
No.
Okay, well then what kind of hounding is not gratuitously cruel?
Well, what part of it is cruel specifically?
First of all, the cornering of the animal surrounded by aggressive dogs. I mean, I've been just walking on a town road, having one aggressive dog come at me as a fairly unpleasant experience.
Okay.
Just the
So
and the other one is the tendency to like a slow, painful death, the
okay.
death of many bites.
So I think I just said that I was really addressing your second example. In terms of the hounds, chasing, with all due respect, and without, I'm not trying to sensationalize, but that's what coyotes do to deer. That's what coyotes do to other animals. And so I'm not, you know what I mean? It's one person's cruel is another person's, where do you draw the line? Do I agree that we should have coyotes being physically attacked by dogs? No. And so that's why I mentioned the use of firearms or archery as a method of the taking. But the actual tracking and moving the animal, no, I'm not suggesting we outlaw that at all.
Okay. Again, if we were to do rules as opposed to statute, I mean, I would want to see those.
Sure.
I'd want to take a lot of examination of those rules to see what we could actually expect them to achieve by way of mitigating the cruelty. I'm not convinced that there's any way. What about property rights?
Well, as I said, that is something that we're looking at, but I was prepared to actually have meetings next week with folks, but I was told we needed to be here today. I'm not ready to present the work that we're looking at right now with respect to that issue. We are sensitive to it. And what I can tell you up to this point is one, the very large percentage of hunters, and I think most people on this committee would admit or acknowledge this, are good neighbors. I have land here that I both hunt, and I know other people hunt. They tell me when they say, hey, can I come on your property? And I'll say, well, actually, no, I have somebody going to be out there. They're like, okay. But I don't post my land And the tradition that is most important is that we're neighborly to each other. And so that's the message that we offer at all of our hunter safety courses, any interaction with especially young hunters, explaining that it is a privilege, to be able to be out there, especially when you're on somebody's property. You need to make sure they know you're there and work with them. So ironic that my dog is weighing in. I apologize.
I was gonna say, would the rules you're proposing speak to the level of control over the dogs? Because the good neighbor thing, it seems to me that sometimes the hounder does not. What do you call a guy who hunts with hounds? As a hounder?
A hounder, yeah.
Okay, it seems that the hounder
Or a
doesn't have
houndsman.
does not have the opportunity to be a good neighbor because he's not there.
Yeah.
The hounds
I'm
are
not-
there, the owner, the hunter is someplace else with
Yeah.
a electronic tracker, and he's on his way maybe, but he's not there at the time that they're eating the cat or whatever
Sure.
it is they're doing.
Well, I'll tell you this. One, I think in most cases there is coordinate or communication. When I hunt, not here, but up in the Northeast Kingdom, I pack food for the day and I leave early in the morning and I won't return until after dark. And I walk many miles, usually unsuccessful, just for the record. But I'm crossing many property lines, but I know who those property owners are, and I already have gotten their permission before I head out. And I think in most cases, that is what happens. Now, are there cases? Obviously, no. This specific bill, the language that we were working on at this point, Senator, was not looking at the control portion of the hounding.
So,
Okay. Mr. Chairman, just before I relinquish the floor, there's a lot of emotions on both sides of this
Yeah.
issue. If I offended anyone with my reference to eating the cat, I apologize. I thought I was being clever, but as I said it, I thought, oh, what am I doing? So I back off on that. Okay, I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Senator McCormick. Senator Campion, last question to you, and then I'd like to move on because we have other witnesses we'd like to hear from this morning.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Commissioner. I apologize for jumping into the conversation late. I think really a couple, just maybe two questions. One I was thinking about, I know with how we heard with hounding, well, maybe this is the way to ask it. Is there, what is the disruption to the life of the hounds as they are being chased away from an area, for example, where their cubs might be, where they or their pups might be, as it relates to food sources, their general area, that kind of thing, in terms of possible starvation? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of food there. They eat many different things. And so moving them to areas within the habitat that are, we don't want them to become dependent on the domestic food, the chickens but moving them out, I mean, it's amazing the number of, and they'll eat moles and voles and other critters.
And what about away from their pups in terms of the livelihood of their pups?
I would defer that question, and I'm going to talk to Kim Royer. I'm not going to speculate on that answer because that would be disrespectful to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Senator. It's good to see you again.
So thank you very much. We have sort of a tenuous connection to Mr. Darling, who is traveling and using a satellite phone. So if he is still available to speak, I'd love to do that. We'll change the order. And thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Senator. And I do apologize. I need to jump to another meeting, but
Okay.
I do have staff watching.
Okay, thanks very
Thank
much. So, Mr. Darling, I see your phone connection to the meeting, and while you still have one, I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself and talk to the committee a little bit about your interest in S281, the coyote hunting with dogs bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate the committee's interest and willingness to hear me out on these issues. And I'm gaining an appreciation for how you all have been struggling through remote meetings and so forth. It's quite impressive that you're able to pull it off. Let me just say that I retired in 2019 from a 38-year career with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, and my roles varied greatly from one-time director of wildlife to being the wildlife management program manager that oversaw the hunting programs, and then I shifted a bit in some of my responsibilities to be the bat biologist for the department, dealing with the recovery of bat populations after white nose syndrome. So I feel like I've had a breadth of experiences, and I've been dealing with a breadth of Vermont's wildlife user groups. When I retired, I had no interest in getting involved in wildlife issues at the legislature or board level. But I felt that after reviewing several of the bills that were coming out, that I needed to at least try to contribute to the conversation on it. I will say this, just to make sure that, to be as credible as I can, I've not spoken to the commissioner. I've never met the commissioner, and it was helpful for me to hear what the department's position on 281 appears to be, and listening to Commissioner Herrick this morning. And let me just, I can understand the committee's frustration with the issue of coyote hunting with dogs. And as I said in my letter, if you had a chance to read that, I believe coyote management in Vermont does need a holistic approach that considers how do we influence people's perception of the species. Wildlife biologists have always believed that treating wild animals with respect is a critical part of our user group. And coyotes have probably been the victim at the bottom of the barrel across the nation. And, to give you an example, I think even in the state of Maine, they still may be doing excessive trapping efforts and deer wintering areas just because they feel it's really important to get rid of that animal to improve deer populations. Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department has never agreed with that philosophy, always been, tried to be an advocate for respecting each and every species of wild animal. And I think the other issue with a holistic approach is how do we assure wildness in our coyote population? We have a good example of that with our bear population, and we have had long bear hunting seasons in the state, and part of that reason was so that we would maintain a high level of wildness in our bears. I think the comprehensive approach that I had talked about in my letter involves really trying to deal with not just the hunting with dogs issues, but also the hunting of coyotes year-round in our state. And this is where perhaps I diverge from the department, but after hearing the commissioner, I'll offer how those two could play hand in hand. But let me just say, by simply prohibiting the hunting of coyotes with dogs, in my opinion, it will not address the data needs that the department has for getting a better handle to monitor and manage our coyote population. The number of participants is questionable, and more data on that will be helpful. An outright ban on hunting coyotes with dogs will not address the year-round season issue. It will not alter a hunter's perception of coyotes. It might even reinforce it more. I'm not sure of that. And it will, as I explained in the end of my letter, I'm very worried that it'll disenfranchise the hunting community. And in doing so, will make it harder and harder to really make some adjustments in the species is managed. I will say that having heard the commissioner this morning, an interesting approach may be to consider what the department is proposing as an initial step, and that really is a step towards having a greater discussion with the hunting community about how coyotes are managed in the state of Vermont, beyond just the hunting with dogs issue. And that may be something that can happen over time, because it will take some time to change hunters' perceptions of coyotes. And I do believe the department is the best entity to deal with it, and I think the suggestion that the commissioner had about using the regulations regarding bear hunting with dogs is really a good model to consider. I think there's opportunity to host a whole set of regulations, restrictions that will begin to manage this. The other thing, and I think it's relative to a couple of questions that were asked, I have had extensive involvement with the Vermont Bear Hound Association, and that has been, wherever you land on the issue of hunting bears with dogs, that organization has really worked pretty hard to try to maintain the best behavior of its members. And to give you an example, if word comes out that a bear hunter, using hounds, mistreated a private landowner or continued to keep going back to that landowner's property even though they were asked not to do so, that members of that association would confront that member. And what's unfortunate about the coyote community, hunting with dogs with coyote community, is they don't have that organization. And I would hope that being placed into the same arena as the bear hunting with dogs issue, they may begin to do that, to realize that the only way that they're going to be able to maintain acceptability for their activity is to, in fact, in themselves. That is a big issue, I think, that has helped the bear hunting community. There's 100, at least last I knew, there were about 100 hunters with bear hunters with dogs. And yes, problems still exist, but I think for the most part, they're really working hard to treat owners with respect. Okay. I guess I'll just end with, it is a real challenge for the department to balance what tends to be the interests of a conservative user group with ever-evolving views and things about wild animals in Vermont. And it takes time, and there's been a long, long tenure of really treating coyotes as the bottom of the barrel, vermin, animals that are affecting hunter success rates, all of those misconceptions. And it's going to take some time to turn those back. But I also have faith in the people that I used to work with, particularly people like Kim Royer, who not only have credibility from the hunting community, but also have really the best interest in sound wildlife management at heart. So with that, I'll close and answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Darling, and thanks for your service to the state of Vermont for decades. I guess the thorniest piece of the bear hounding practices, as I understand it from previous years' work on that area, is this notion of legal control being conferred simply by wearing a radio collar, and then the hound can be miles away from the hunter or hounder, and essentially, out of their control, at which point they can end up trespassing into properties where people don't want hounds present, and then inevitably, there are some conflicts when that happens with. So do you have any thoughts about the notion of what real control would entail? I think I was reading a report, a hunter's report on the fox they eventually took, and they said, they chased them 15 miles. So that's crossing a lot of property probably at a great distance much of the time, because roads, I don't think the foxes use the roads much, and the hunters probably do, because I think they're often using a vehicle to get around and then sort of cross a line of hunting rather than track it the whole way.
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt that this is a difficult issue. At a minimum, where a pack of hounds is crossing posted property, and the landowner either hears them or sees them, and then confronts the hunter, the only answer to that is for that hunter not to return to that. And for the most part, bear hunters try to stay in more remote areas simply because they don't want their dogs crossing roads and getting hit by cars.
Right.
The element of radio telemetry is one that certainly the public doesn't feel is part of fair chase, is part of what you consider a quality hunt. But having been with houndsmen who are chasing bears, I'll tell you, sometimes the fact that you can know where your dogs are, drive around to another location, and if those dogs have treated a bear, you're going to be able to get to that bear a lot faster than if you were walking around through the woods and those dogs were few miles ahead of you.
Sure.
But anytime you've got a predator like a bear or a coyote, any of these wide-ranging animals, and you're chasing them with dogs, it's a challenge. But ultimately the answer is you shouldn't be chasing those animals in those areas where you're going to basically run into problems with landowners who do not want you on that. To me, that's the.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for your testimony. Any committee questions for Mr. Darling? All right. So thank you again, and thanks for participating.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thank you all.
I'd like to go next to Brenda Galdenzi. Ms. Galdenzi, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. For the record, I am Brenda Galdenzi, president and co-founder of Protect Our Wildlife. I am here today as an unpaid volunteer on behalf of our 3,000 Vermont supporters from every corner of the state and our 20,000 social media followers in support of Bill S-281, a ban on coyote hounding. This wasn't part of my original testimony, but I think it's important for me to share that I have been at these issues with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, both the department and the board, for over 10 years now. And I am very grateful that this bill is with the legislature and not with the Fish and Wildlife Board. The reason why we have Bill S-129, if I may speak on behalf of my colleagues at Vermont Wildlife Coalition, is that there has been great frustration working with the Fish and Wildlife Board and the department for years now. And I think it's safe to say that there's little interest in pursuing these issues through the Fish and Wildlife Board. I have been emailing consistently with Kim Royer for years now at Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department on the issue of coyotes, and begging her basically to really pursue some type of PR campaign on coyotes. How do we elevate the image of coyotes? How do we address this culture of extreme hatred and misunderstanding towards coyotes? And nothing's ever happened. And there was a Fish and Wildlife Board hearing back in 2019 that was attended by close to 100 wildlife advocates, hunters, seventh generation Vermonters, farmers. We were so proud that people showed up in Montpelier. And it was a Vermont Law School student who had put forth this really thought out petition to the Fish and Wildlife Board, simply asking to regulate coyote hunting, to allow for a regulated coyote hunting season versus the current open season. She had a petition that garnered, I want to say, over 10,000 signatures. She gave a fantastic presentation. People spoke up with, really passionate comments from, again, a wide range of stakeholders. And the Fish and Wildlife Board and Department said, no, we're not interested. So I only share this because we're at the legislature because we have been trying for years now to work with Fish and Wildlife unsuccessfully. So I thought that was important for me to mention. And I also wanted to share that Commissioner Herrick mentioned regulating coyote hounding. Regulating it is not going to do anything to address the main concerns with coyote hounding. He mentioned regulating the method of take, but you can't regulate the method of take when a pack of hounds are chasing a coyote and the hounder is literally miles away in their truck. They have no idea, no control of what happens when that coyote bays up and their hounds descend on the coyote and bite at it and maul it, as we see. So there really is no regulating the method of take because the hounder's not there. And that's evidenced over and over again with both bear hounding and coyote hounding. Additionally, regulating coyote hounding through the Fish and Wildlife Board is going to do nothing to address the issue of these hounds violating private property rights. It's just not possible. We had these discussions, I think, a couple of years ago in the legislature, concerning the current definition of what control of dogs means. And control of dogs simply means that the dog is wearing a GPS collar. So I'm always open to compromise. I'm always open to reaching across the aisle. I think we've proven that. I just don't see how that's possible. So I'm going to just continue with my testimony as I had written it last night. And it's going to be just under 10 minutes as I'm sensitive to time. So I could take the easy route today, and I thought about it, and using up my 10 minutes, sharing gruesome photos and videos depicting packs of radio-collared dogs cornering and attacking a lone coyote in Vermont. I decided not to do that. I think words are equally as compelling. I thought about kind of framing it this way. Imagine if this activity weren't currently legal in Vermont, right? And a citizen came to you asking to legalize the hunting of coyotes year-round with unlimited hounds under no control of the hunter, allowing hounders to place piles of bait, whether it's deer, livestock carcasses, and other items, to lure coyotes in. And then the hounders unleash packs of hounds onto the scent, resulting in the hounds running into roads through posted private property, placing people's property in danger and their domestic pets. I can't imagine that any legislator would say, yes, that sounds like a great piece of legislation. Let's move forward with that. So here we are with this activity in Vermont that's currently legal. And we have a chance to ban it. So I thought that was an interesting way of kind of looking at it. And also when an activity at its very foundation is fueled by an intense hatred towards a wild animal, in this case, coyotes, it can only lead to bad behavior. Would deer hunters who generally revere and respect deer ever tolerate this kind of treatment towards deer? I would say no. And after reading hundreds of comments, and that's not an exaggeration, hateful comments hurled at coyotes by Vermont hunters and hounders. I am not the least bit surprised that so many hounders appear to enjoy inflicting prolonged fear and torment and suffering on this animal that they deemed as another. You know, it's different from us. We don't understand it. We hate it. They've deemed this animal vermin. You know, it's an almost daily occurrence on social media, the level of hatred towards these animals. So the starting point for coyote hounding, you know, is hatred and seeking vengeance. And that same kind of mindset, you know, that predator hatred that we're seeing is not the same with other types of hunting. And I would say that what's happening here in Vermont with our eastern coyotes is exactly what we're seeing out west with the massacre of wolves that are being run down by hounds. It's the same intolerance and hatred towards, you know, these apex predators. So I'd like to highlight 3 reasons why we believe coyote hounding should be banned. Number 1, it is exceptionally cruel. As someone who's been involved with dog and cat rescue for about 25 years now, and having adopted dog breeds who are typically used in dog fighting, I can say that dog fighting and coyote hounding are essentially the same, except with coyote hounding, it is multiple dogs on one dog, a coyote who actually shares domestic dog DNA. The coyote is always at a disadvantage. Coyotes are run for miles over large tracts of land, both private and public, until that animal is no longer able to run due to exhaustion. That coyote can't climb a tree, so the animal is left with biting hounds surrounding it until the hunter finally shows up. Before shooting the coyote, photos and videos are often taken, again, not dissimilar from dogfighting, and the coyote is ultimately shot. Photos depicting the activity aren't hard to find. There's a photo that always sticks out in my mind and keeps me up at night of a coyote in Vermont who had been chased onto thin ice and fell through shallow water with only his head exposed. And the hounds surrounded this coyote who was underwater. And the hounder, you know, photographed the melee. There's countless examples of this violent activity on social media, on our website. You can see so for yourself. Again, I could have taken the easy route today and just bombarded you with photos and images, but I encourage you to do your own research. As the chair and committee assistant already know, Carrie Edmonds from Craftsbury, Vermont, granted me this permission to share this short quote with you. I quote her: "We had a coyote attacked on our front lawn. The coyote tried to hide under our shed, and the hounds pulled him out and mauled him over and over. He got loose and they mauled him again against our cat fence." End quote. So it's bad enough that people oppose coyote hounding and it's happening elsewhere, but to have it happen on your own private property, your home, where you should feel safe, is really unacceptable. And that leads me to my next point. And probably the biggest point where we've had a lot of people who maybe wouldn't otherwise support our organization reach out to us is the issue of violation of private property rights, and really diminishing people's quality of life. You know, people can spend days posting their land, you know, only to have the hounds trespass. And the prior Fish and Wildlife Commissioner would tell people that, you know, hounds can't read posted signs. And, you know, that is absolutely correct. And that is the reason why coyote hounding should be banned, because no matter what type of rulemaking you pursue through the Fish and Wildlife Board, it is not going to change the very fact that these hounds will end up miles away from where they started, into roads and on private property. And the hounds not only violate private property owner rights, but they endanger people on public land. After receiving a law enforcement report through a public records request, we found that a woman was riding her bike with her dog right by her side. It's something they did quite frequently in Fairleigh, Vermont, when a pack of coyote hounds, four hounds, chased her and her dog for 2 miles and violently attacked her dog while she watched and the hounder was nowhere in sight. And she thought her dog was going to die. She's a veterinarian, and her professional opinion was that these dogs were going to kill her dog. And again, the coyote hounder was nowhere around. He didn't show up until I think about 10, 15 minutes later. These coyote hounds are used as weapons, and they are trained to pursue and take down coyotes. So it's really no surprise to me that these dogs would decide to turn their attention to a domestic dog, during this heightened, frenzied state that you'll see these dogs exhibit. And my last point, number 3, coyote hounding does nothing to manage coyote populations. In fact, it may cause increased breeding. There's no shortage of ways to kill coyotes in Vermont. So it's not as though if we banned coyote hounding, that there be no ways to kill coyotes for those who still choose to do so. Coyotes are killed 365 days a year, night and day. It is legal to shoot them over bait piles, use thermal night scopes, high-tech game calling devices that mimic like a coyote pup in distress or a fawn. It calls these coyotes into close range and then they're shot. There's zero reporting, no bag limits. They're also trapped during the legal trapping season in leg hole traps, and they're also trapped outside of the legal trapping season by landowners in defensive property under Title 10, 4828. Something interesting is that these hounders, and Mr. Mack, I think, will speak to this, they bait coyotes with those very animals like cows and pigs and deer parts that they don't want coyotes to eat. So they're luring these coyotes near roads and farms in residential areas with these bait piles. And then they hide behind, livestock predation as a reason to kill them. And as far as, coyotes that are justifiably causing a problem for people, I understand that. And I absolutely support a landowner's right to protect their property and their chickens and their farm. There are countless ways to haze problem coyotes non-lethally. The number one thing you do is remove the attractant. You get electric fencing. There's a number of things that can be done. Livestock guardian dogs are fantastic. Killing them just indiscriminately like this does absolutely nothing to stop predation on livestock. In fact, the indiscriminate killing of coyotes may exacerbate risks to livestock. And the reason for that is that killing social carnivores like coyotes or wolves out west can lead to the disruption of their social and foraging ecology in ways that increase the number of transient coyotes that may come in and breed with the remaining pack numbers when the alpha male and female are killed. So there's so much more to be shared about that. And I believe Project Coyote shared with you a document with numerous studies cited. That's really, really important to understand. So in closing, make no mistake, like dogfighting, coyote hounding is a recreational activity that's enjoyed by a subset of Vermont hunters. The activity is antithetical to science, to hunting ethics, and violates property owner rights. We ask you to please vote this bill out of committee and help elevate the ethics of hunting and protect the untold numbers of Vermonters who are affected by this. And many of them are too afraid to speak out in fear of retaliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Galdenzi. Senator McCormick? We can't hear you yet.
Thank you. During a conversation between the commissioner and me, I had asked him about just the inherent cruelty of a pack of dogs attacking a coyote. And he apologized for his answer, but my sense is he didn't need to. I think he made a challenging point, and I'd like to invite you to respond. He had said that nature is cruel and that, in fact, a pack of dogs attacking a coyote is very much what a pack of coyotes will do to a deer in the wild. And would you comment on that?
Thank you. I appreciate you asking that. I actually wrote that down as something I wanted to respond to, but out of consideration for time, I didn't. I'm disappointed to hear the commissioner say that, because coyotes that are pursuing deer are doing so for survival. Coyotes are operating as an apex predator in Vermont. They're killing to survive. And they typically go after those animals who are either injured, weak. They really help natural selection. So hounds are not part of nature. They're actually the opposite of what happens in nature. So to compare what a wild animal does for survival, operating as a keystone species on our landscapes, to what a pack of radio-collared hounds are doing to another wild animal, I think is a real unfortunate comparison, and one that we take great issue with.
Thank you. Yeah, I had, when I asked that question, I did not actually just say cruelty. I said gratuitous cruelty. I think that's the distinction you're making as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think there's, even you have the best hunter making an informed shot, and sometimes, it causes suffering, but the intent's not there, right? I mean, I don't know of any deer hunter that wants to inflict prolonged suffering on an animal. The activity with hounding, it's at its very base, it's rooted in inflicting prolonged suffering, fear, torment on an animal. That is the, why I believe it's patently cruel.
Thanks. That's all, Mr. Chairman, for me.
Thank you, Senator McCormick. Thank you, Ms. Galdenzi. I'd like to call next, please, on Jeffrey Mack. Good morning,
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Mack. Thank you
Hello.
for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate everybody being here. I want to make a few points today, and my biggest point is where I live, I can see a couple miles with rolling fields and hills, and it's on the weekends, most every weekend here in the wintertime, it's a mass slaughter. That's the only way to describe it. That's exactly what they're out to do. I call it the killing fields of Shoreham on Saturday and Sunday. We have, I would assume, an abundant source of coyotes. They're here January, February, March, and through April. The reason I believe that it's all about the mass slaughter is the constant bait pile, the constant feeding they do to the coyotes. They start in October with various things. They feed them as much venison as they can. And I don't even know where they're getting the deer at this time, because they keep restocking with parts of deer's rib cages and heads. And so I don't know where those are coming from, but it continues on. The funny thing to me is we're talking about putting in a law which already actually exists on the books in the state of Vermont. It is illegal to host, put on, attend any kind of dog fight. You can't release dogs on dogs. It is plain and simple against the law. It's already against the law. And what's intriguing to me is how we have, if you have a hunting license in your pocket, the laws are different for you than the laws would be for me. For instance, there's a leash law in the town of Shoreham. And a wildlife person, anybody from Fish and Wildlife, would tell me that if I was in the woods or in the fields, I should keep my dogs on a leash. And so I asked them, why is that? And they said, we don't want your dog harassing or chasing wildlife. It's against the law. So here we sit today discussing why would we allow a pack of hounds to run dog on dog for miles. And if the coyote is lucky enough to survive the chase, the line of pickup trucks with people sitting in them with long guns, they're probably not going to get through the line, because the firing starts. It doesn't stop until the coyotes are down. And why I say mass killing is because we don't kill one or two. We want to kill every single one. Not only do we want to kill all of them today, but we're coming back tomorrow to see if we missed any. We're going to restock the bait pile, and we're going to come back next weekend and get more of them. It's an endless supply of coyotes coming in, hounders releasing the dogs, dog on dog, and it's a killing frenzy.
And then tell you to go back in your house.
And I asked a coyote hunter one day out at my mailbox, why are you doing this? His reply was, there's nothing else to do this time of year. And I said, well, I don't appreciate any of it. And I would hope that I only have 10 acres and I don't want the dogs are already running all through my property. He told me, go back inside because there was nothing I could do about it. So the law will state if you have a hunting license, this is all perfectly legal. If you don't have a hunting license, it is frowned upon. So I'm confused about that whole thing. And they talk about regulations on hounding. And the regulations, we don't know what they would be yet, but they talk about different things. It will not change anything. We all know the area that these game wardens have. It's a large area. If you ask me, there's not enough game wardens in this state. So anytime someone literally gets out of their truck in the middle of the road here and brings up their gun, the law enforcement or the game warden will ask me, do you know who it was? Well, no, I don't know who it was, but they weren't 25 feet off the road. Well, it's your word against their word. You need to get pictures and videos. Otherwise, there's really nothing I can do. That puts me in a position to go out there and face a bunch of guys or women with trucks and lawn guns who are adrenaline hyped because they're out slaughtering coyotes today with hounds. So I would like the bill S-281 to go forward and to pass. There's no regulations that'll stop what's going on now. You can't stay close to the hounds. It's impossible to keep up with the hounds. I'll see 6 pickup trucks out on the road out here, and one person is gone out of his pickup truck, and everybody else is sitting in the truck waiting for it to happen. There's no hunting. There's no getting attached to the land in Vermont. It's all about the mass slaughter of coyotes. And I want the laws to be the same for everybody. I want the laws to be the same for me as it is a hounder. Hounding should be outlawed. We're not into bears, but they shouldn't do it with bears. They should definitely not do it with coyotes. It infringes on people's property rights. I have a hard time enjoying my land on the weekends because I know on Friday night, I know they're coming and I know it's going to make at least a lot of noise, a lot of gunshots, a lot of truck traffic.
Trauma
and
fear.
You know, fear and trauma is what they're introducing to this state. Gives the state a black eye. I would like Vermont to be a leader in this country and make an example that they will treat wildlife fairly, and they want people to come here to view wildlife as well as be an ethical hunter and have a good time with your friends out in the woods hunting in a proper manner. So I think that'll about cover it for me. I would like to know if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mack. Any questions from members of the committee? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Bray.
Okay. With that, I'd like to turn to our next witness, Karima Vorni. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my experience. I live here in Addison County. I bought a home here, small farm, 37 acres, about 4 years ago. And every winter, my land, my woods, my home, my family are terrorized by coyote hounders. I had a baby a couple winters ago, and so I've been home with my infant and unable to do anything. But you hear them, it's terrible. It sounds like, I don't know if you know the sound of a pack of hounds, but it sounds like donkeys being tortured or something. It's this horrible braying sound. And again, I've been unable to do anything. I'm going to recount an event that happened less than 2 weeks ago. And I really want to iterate, this is not a one-off event. This is a repeated event. This is multiple events. So actually, I'm here in my home. So they've been in this winter. So again, this is weeks on end. It's sporadic. It's not like every weekend, but January, February, March into April. This particular January, February, they're coming on a Saturday morning. I start hearing them around 8 or 9 in the morning. I'm in my home at around 10 in the morning. The hounds surround my house. They run the fence line. I've got horses and they're in their paddock. My horses are in their paddock frantically running around. This is on ice and snow, so they easily could get injured in that kind of chaos. The hounds are barking horribly. My dog is luckily inside. My dog starts, of course, barking. My child, my 2-year-old starts screaming and crying. It's terrible chaos. It's about 10 minutes. My husband usually works on Saturdays, but this is again, Saturday, February 12th. This particular Saturday, my husband's home, and so he watches my kid and I go out. I just want to be clear, this is a regular routine for them. So there's a road a mile or 2 south of me where they pull their trucks. This is 4 or 5 trucks, I don't know, 10 men, I'm not sure. And they release the hounds like on the side of a cornfield. And then they pick them up on the other road, which is north of me. And so this is several square miles in between their release point and their drop-off point. And this is not no man's land. I want to say there's 10 or 12 residences on this particular strip of road. And there's 5 of us in this little area of forest, and I'm smack dab in the middle. So they just release and run them through. And so I go, and all I'm wanting, because I can't do anything else, is to have a conversation and to tell them the harm that they're doing to my family. And so I go, and first of all, the hunters parked at the bottom of the hill because they don't want to go to the main entry point because they don't want people. He's trying to be conspicuous. They know that they're unwanted. They know that people here don't like it, and they're trying to hide. I say, respectfully, your dogs are trespassing on my land. Oh, my land is legally posted. I'm registered with the town. The hunter says to me, and I quote, "My dogs can't read your posted signs." The weekend before, they shot a coyote out there. It must have been on my land or my neighbor's because I heard the shots and everything. I asked him, "Did you take down a coyote last weekend?" He said yes. Then the hounds run into the road. And by the way, I do have video of this. So if anyone would like me to send you the video, I can. And I've also reported the incident to the game warden. The hounds run into the road, totally uncontrolled. The way this man is parked at the bottom of a hill, this is a blind sight for cars. Easily, and this is a car accident waiting to happen. The hounds plow through the road. This is just one incident. I'm just telling you for an example. They run into the opposite field. The man runs after it. I don't even think the hounds looked at him, at the hunter. Like they are the worst recall I've ever seen. They actually have no recall. And he runs after them. He screaming, come here, into this field. He catches one of the hounds. I run out to try to help. I hold one of the hounds. I'm trying to help him get the situation control. And he runs after the other hound, which is at this point crossed over into another neighbor's property who is home, whatever. And I don't need to go into all the rest of the details. You kind of get the picture of the scene. Cannot get that hound, has to go back and get the other hunters, which are miles away. Another incident, I passed by them and I thought, okay, I'll just go talk. The minute I show up, they flee. I mean, 4 or 5 trucks, they just flee. And I have to ask myself, are they afraid of an unarmed 130-pound woman in a Subaru? No. They don't want me to see their faces. They don't want me to take a picture. They don't want to be identified. They know that people don't appreciate this. None of these men called the town to see if the land is posted. None of these men have communicated with me to ask permission. I worked 5 days a week, full-time, 12 months a year, so that on the weekend, on a Saturday morning, I could maybe enjoy a little recreation. on land which I pay significant property taxes on. And I have to keep my dog and my kid in my house and hope my horses will be okay. I ride horses around. My next door neighbor, the girl, she has horses across the street. Just saw two 13-year-old girls on their horses riding down the road yesterday. I live in a community of dairy farmers and of working families and people with animals. And this is a recipe for disaster. If a pack of hounds blows by a horse, the horse is gonna spook, someone's gonna get injured. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I have a family dog. Y'all probably have family dogs. She's not an aggressive dog. If she's outside and a pack of hounds come, she's gonna defend. Like, what if my 2-year-old's out there? She's gonna defend her family. She's gonna get taken down and mauled. I've been told to carry mace. I've been told to carry bear spray. So I'm supposed to, 365 days a year, I'm supposed to carry bear spray on me, not because of the coyotes, which, by the way, have never bothered anyone. There's random events, but not because there's cougars or grizzlies, but I have to carry this because of someone's intentional behavior, reckless behavior. Do I have to carry mace to go the 150 feet from my front door to my barn to feed my horses? Because that's where everyone's welcome to come over and see the tracks. They're all over my barn, these dogs. Do I have to carry mace to walk down my driveway to check my mail? My kid's 2. In a couple of years, he's gonna ask me, Mom, can I go sled at the hill behind the house, right here, like 10 feet from my arm right now? Can I go sled down the hill? I'm gonna say, sure, honey, but here's a can of mace to carry with you, and you're 6 years old. And I talked to one of the hunters on a different occasion, and again, just wanting these people are violating our family. So I think, oh, maybe they'll give me 2 minutes of their time, since this, And before I open my mouth, he says, I don't have to, quote, I don't have to talk to you. I'm not doing anything illegal. And he's right. He's right. He's not doing anything illegal. The law as it is grants him, these people, immunity. And I sit with you all right now and I just ask, what is the point? What is the purpose of this activity? All of my neighbors are hunters, deer hunters, people who follow the law. I grew up in Wisconsin on dairy farmland with deer hunting. This is not what this is. The science, I'll just say a few more comments and the science is clear. This is not effective population control. These animals are not consumed. My understanding that these are the basic prerequisites for the definition of hunting in the United States. You say, oh, okay, it's for sport. Where's the sport? I mean, these dogs aren't trained. There's no skill involved. I train horses, I've trained Mustangs. Like your first priority is safety, precautionary steps for you, the animal, and for others. So, and then the other question is, why is it okay for someone to pursue a sport on my front yard without my consent? It's like if a hockey team came over and was like, we're gonna use the pond in your backyard as an ice rink. These men don't tell me when they're coming. They don't tell me how long they're gonna be there. I hear this issue of regulation. How do you regulate? I mean, I held that hound by this GPS tracker, who, by the way, did not want to be held because all they are trained to do is follow a scent and kill. Okay. There's no controlling this. If you want to regulate it into a season, what's going to happen is, instead of these guys coming once a week for a couple months, they're going to come once a day for a couple weeks, and with a vengeance. And again, like deer hunting season, I don't go out. It's fine. I understand it's a couple weeks. I don't want to interfere. Safety first. But this isn't a question of me not taking a hike during rifle season when that's probably the safest option, even on my own land. I totally understand it. Makes total sense. Even if it's regulated to a season, these hounds are coming to me and my home. So I don't even, what do I do? Not let my dog out to the, do I lock my horses in a barn for several weeks during the season? You know, so these are the sorts of questions we really have to grapple with and think about. This issue about chickens, I have chickens. If you have a hole in your fence, like a weasel, a marten, a fish, or a fox is gonna get in there way faster than a coyote. I don't really think that we're doing this because of chickens. Yeah, I have other thoughts, but I just would really like to you all to think about that this is good people, you know, people wanting to just live their lives and they pay their property taxes, and really all that this sport, whatever you want to call it, only people it benefits are a few sort of violent and antisocial individuals. I don't really know what to call them. And it privileges them over others. And I just don't really understand why. So my closing remark is just to ask if you have, and again, it really is a privilege to be able to vote on this issue, to consider that you could make a change to improve people's lives and to prevent harm from happening, because it will happen. And not only that, but that you consider making Vermont a place that's welcoming to working families, and that's a safe place for raising children. And that is my final remark, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vorni. And with that, we'll go to our last witness of the morning on this, Chuck Storrow. And just because, I don't want to forget to say this. There is a lot of controversy around this issue, we all know, and we're all getting many, many emails, and people are very sensitive about how many people testify on which side of the issue. So we had invited Chris Bradley, the executive director of the Vermont Federation of Sportsmen's Club, to provide testimony this morning. He was unable to join us. He will join us tomorrow. So I just want, there is, again, for people keeping track of how many people pro and con we're hearing on the bills, I think we're going to be quite balanced, but today won't be because one of the other witnesses is unable to join us. So with that, Mr. Storrow, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Chuck Storrow. I am a lobbyist with Leonine Public Affairs based here in Montpelier. I'm here speaking to you on behalf of the Vermont Wildlife Coalition. The Vermont Wildlife Coalition is a group of Vermonters who are interested in wildlife management policy issues. Generally speaking, the Vermont Wildlife Coalition supports the ethical, fair chase forms of hunting, such as deer hunting, upland bird hunting, and waterfowl hunting. The coalition does oppose the use of hounds in bear hunting and coyote hunting, and it also opposes recreational trapping. I have a bit of a challenge this morning to follow up on the previous two witnesses who spoke extremely eloquently about why this bill is very important and is needed. The Vermont Wildlife Coalition fully supports it. At the outset, it needs to be said that there is no legitimate need or reason to hunt coyotes in general. Coyotes do not have a adverse impact on the deer population in Vermont. The limiting factor on the deer population is the extent of winter habitat, not predation by coyotes. And in this regard, I would direct the committee members' attentions to a document that I submitted earlier this morning. It's a two-page fact sheet from the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department about eastern coyotes, and it's posted on the department's webpage under my name. And you know, as Commissioner Herrick alluded to, the department acknowledges that coyotes are not a threat to the deer population in the state. So there's no reason to hunt them for that purpose. And as a practical matter, hunting them doesn't really limit their population. Coyotes are very adaptable. They will breed more and fill in their ranks to the extent that they are killed. And the other they're very territorial. So if there's an area that's opened up, coyotes from another area will move in there. So it's really, there's no reason from a biological point of view to hunt coyotes. And there's no real need to do it for the purpose of using them. People do not eat coyotes. This just really comes down to some people feel the need to kill coyotes because they like to do that. And that's unethical and should not be condoned in the law. And the notion of using dogs to hunt coyotes just takes it to another whole level of unethical behavior. As has been just graphically described by the previous witnesses, you got a situation where you got 4 or 5 dogs going against a coyote. And that's just manifestly unfair. It is, as Mr. Mack indicated, essentially dog fighting. If it wasn't for the fact that you're a hunter, licensed hunter, you would be breaking the law in doing that. So we fully support the bill for that reason. I was interested to hear the commissioner speak about the notion of changing the law to require permits for hounding. That's fine, I suppose, but it really doesn't get at the underlying issue, which is the unethical behavior for no good purpose in using dogs to hunt coyotes. And as he mentioned, this would require action by the Fish and Wildlife Board. The Fish and Wildlife Board has rejected petitions to establish a season for hunting coyotes. Right now, you can hunt coyotes 365 days a year. And so, I will also put in a plug for S129, which would transform the Fish and Wildlife Board into an advisory body only, because the board has demonstrated, as it did when it rejected that petition in June of 2019 to establish a season, that it is not interested in limiting any of these unethical behaviors. So I guess I will leave it at that and urge the committee to pass the bill.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Storrow. Any committee questions for Mr. Storrow? All right. All right. So with that, I think we will take. We've run over, but that's fine. We'll take a committee break and return at 11 o'clock to pick up S148, an act relating to environmental justice in Vermont. At this point, we should have a clean bill to review with interested parties. And if it turns out to be clean without any contentious last edits or something along those lines, we may be able to vote it. If there's a final round of minor editing that has to occur, we've got another time slot available for us for that tomorrow morning in case we need it. So just to wrap up this section, I want to thank everyone who's participated. For those who are watching the video through YouTube, I'll speak just for myself, but I think that the other members of the committee are in the same situation. I think I haven't done a count, but I have many hundreds of emails on the topic, and I'm reading them all. Frankly, I'm unable to write back to everyone who writes to me, but you can count on the fact that we're reading any and all emails that come in, as well as some people are sending additional information. And what I receive, particularly when it includes extra information, I send it along to the committee assistant, June Newman, who you can also email materials to. And then that ensures that every member of the committee gets a copy. So we will continue to take, listen to all parties and broadly, and then we'll consider moving forward. And I think for now, rather than ask the committee where they are, I'd like to give us all the time and space to absorb the testimony we've had, and we'll reflect on it and consider voting this bill or taking other action tomorrow, Friday. We have scheduled time again on the bill.